Let me give you just a little bit of context real quickly before the main speaker comes up. Here's the deal. I grew up going to a Catholic church every single Sunday. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, and we went to church every single Sunday. And one of 6 kids, as soon as I got off to Ohio State University, you know, the things that I lived for were Ohio State, Michigan football, you know, going to spring break. I didn't go to church anymore. Bottom line is I came down to Dallas, Texas. I met a girl who had no religious upbringing at all, and we got invited to that big old mega church across the road called Fellowship Church. And I was about 98, and I got my first Bible study ever. And along that same time period, my mother had sent me a tape. She's the one that everybody thought was just so religious. You know what I'm talking about? Like if you met her, she'd be putting holy water and getting you scapulars and things like that. And she sent me a tape called Signs from God, Science Test Faith. It was on a big VHS tape, you know. And I thought it was amazing, but I didn't know what it meant. In fact, I was not going to Catholic church, but I was really studying the difference between a Protestant and Catholic. Long story short is, I lost that tape. My mother passed away very tragically in 2004. And about 2008, so 8-9 years later, some guy calls me and says, "Hey Tim, I was cleaning out my house and I found you left a tape at my house." And he said, "I thought maybe you'd want it." And I got there and it was my mom's VHS tape. See, the problem is I never found out what it meant. And I told Ron earlier, I called Fox News. I was like, what? I had 2 questions, you know. Is it real? And what does it mean? And it took me like 9-10 years to find that out. And we won't be going into that full story tonight, but I got a hold of Mr. Ron Tesoriero. Am I saying that right, Ron? I never said it right like 5, 6, 7 years ago. But I got a hold of Ron Tesoriero from Australia through the internet, like a spaz that I am. Sent him like 5 pages of how I'm called to do this, I'm sure. And Ron sent me a book called Reason to Believe. And by the way, I know Ron, you give any money he gets, they give to the Mary McCallop Foundation. I mean, he's not in this for money. I don't make a red cent off any of the stuff back there. But if you don't got that book, if you didn't get that book, make sure you leave with the book, whether you're agnostic, atheist, Catholic, whatever. Just leave with the book. It's amazing. But what happened is when I heard the story, it changed my life, to say the least. And I had one thing to say, and that's probably why you're all here tonight, the ones that have already seen this. I said, why doesn't everybody know about this? And I called Ron and I said, Ron, we need to get you on Larry King. We need to get you on Oprah. And he said, because I'm kind of a passionate spaz and he's real laid back and methodical, and he said, not now, Tim. We're doing more research. I'm like, more research? Unbelievable. And for those of you who have never seen this, what you're going to miss is there's a lady that Ron personally filmed. I mean, there's this guy, he's a household name in Australia. Think of Mike Wallace from 60 Minutes, Anderson Cooper, Pierce Morgan. That's who he is in Australia. And when Ron researched all of this stuff and came to believe it's true, I remember he said, he goes, it would be like wanting a portrait of your wife and your next door neighbor was Leonardo da Vinci. And he goes, that was my neighbor, Mike Willesee, famous. And he said, I wanted the whole world to know this. I wanted the whole world to know this. And so back in 2008 or so, I had a chance for them to come into the United States, and we filmed them. There's a DVD back there, but I want you to know that there's so much more. He personally filmed the lady, this famous personality. They filmed a lady having a stigmata. You won't see that tonight. A statue crying and bleeding. For 5 years I've been talking about this and showing the films, and people say, but did you see it yourself? I'm like, well, no. And I said, but here we have a guy who did it. The film footage you see, he was the primary person. In fact, nothing like that has ever been filmed in history, ever, with the prophetic statement of Miss Catalina Rivas. But there was something very profound, I won't steal his thunder, that he'd been working on as it relates as a Catholic to the source and summit of our faith. And I'm sure he'll go into the details of how that came about, yes? A little bit. He was called on, he was the main person involved, he's a very humble man, when the then Cardinal and the now Pope Francis called Dr. Ricardo Castanon And Mr. Tesoriero was there filming the primary investigation. And it is literally life-changing. I want to warn you. He's very smart. He's very analytical. He's very in-depth. So if you're scientific, you're going to love him. If you're like me, you're going to have to hear it like 5 times. It's a lot to chew on. There's a book, there's a DVD. We got plenty of time. We're going to hang out. And we actually have a follow-up starting Monday. And it's just absolutely life-changing. He's been to, I don't know, 3 places in the United States. And this is his last stop before he moves on. And it happened to be at St. Francis of Assisi, the very name the then Cardinal, the now Pope, took on. So we feel it's very providential. So if you give a warm welcome all the way from Australia from Mr. Ron Tesoriero.
I, for one, think it's authentic from what I've read. My question is, have you tried to, those that did this, have they attempted to submit the findings to a peer-reviewed medical journal of some sort? I'm not sure if in the case of the Shroud, if they attempted to, but as I recall, they had an official report and they had a press release, and it was kind of widely talked about in the secular press. So my question would be, has your group attempted to submit something that, and was it rejected, or what was the outcome?
It's early days yet. We haven't worked on that side of the publicity of it. But just on the question of peer review, the book in itself is a publication which will be considered by others who have a point of view. It's interesting also that the scientist who worked on this job, the one who was looking down Dr. Lawrence, the one that's not Zuckerby in that film, he, in an interview, said when we were filming him, he said, "Look, I don't believe in God. I don't believe there's an afterlife." He said, "I might be surprised when I die." He says that I don't believe in any of these stories in the Bible. He said, "But you know, if ever it could be shown this story is true, it will transform the world." That was when we interviewed him. I sent him the book Unseen a few months ago, and he wrote back and said, "I was very impressed. I now hold the view that evolution is not, stepwise evolution is not the explanation for human existence." So from him that was quite a good concession. But it's early days yet, so I'm sure it'll be considered.
What type of evolution? I missed that. What you said, he said, I now hold the view that what type of evolution?
Stepwise, in other words, from the explanation for our existence, that we came from less primitive forms over 3.8 billion years. I mean, he obviously, being party to this story, knew that the complexity of the cell, knew of its spontaneous appearance, and that it's an illogical assumption to accept that the only way that could happen is through billions of years of evolution, in the light of its evidence.
Hi. I don't really have a question. I was just having a thought. I think the guy just left, but on the question of whether it was the water that was responsible for creating the life, if you look at the statue of Ecce Homo, that didn't have any water on it, and yet biological matter was able to spontaneously.
It's another good example. So it's, you know, in science they say replication is important. Well, here we have the phenomenon being replicated.
In relation to the water, isn't it true what you said, that when the scientists reviewed the heart, that it was 3 days since the person had trauma? So that would be another point to prove that the water scenario is one way.
Well, the water scenario is difficult in the context of what we found, because the tissue was in water, it didn't deteriorate, the white blood cells were there and they should have gone within a few minutes but remained vital, living after a number of years in water. So that's something we can't explain. But we can't deny that the tissue is tissue that has the appearance of human, that it has white blood cells that are living, and that's certainly contrary to the way in which science says these things can come into existence or be sustained.
Tissue from Argentina, where is it now? Where is it being kept?
Well, the church still has the remnant of the material in a bowl in a special tabernacle there, so it will presumably remain there until some time. It's still there, yeah.
And did you say that it's an ongoing miracle because of the white blood cells?
It's an unknown miracle. So, did you say it again? Okay. Is it
an ongoing miracle?
Did you say
Well,
it's an ongoing miracle, just like the Talmud? They say it's an ongoing miracle because it doesn't disintegrate?
yeah. In this exercise, from the scientific point of view, I don't use the word miracle. All I say is, this is what's there. These are the consequences of us finding that. Because, and I don't, I mean, the point, my argument is sustainable without reference to appealing to the supernatural. I say it's a reality, it's there, and this is what I see. And you say it can't exist unless it's from that tree, and it's not from that tree. That's the argument I put. The miracle side, if we talk about miracles, then we have to go back and talk to these people saying, look, you can't explain this down here. That might be a miracle too, but you don't need to explain that to discuss this. And I'm saying the same thing here. In my case, it's a reality, and I'm comparing it against your assumptions. Yeah.
So this sample, as well as the one from Poland, were both tested, and they were able to see the DNA, just couldn't profile it, or they could not even create a code. What I'm trying to understand is, could you take the DNA codes from both and compare them to each other?
You can theoretically do it from the mitochondrial DNA, which is outside the nucleus. My argument is that because we didn't get a nuclear profile from the nucleus in the Argentina case, that is what one might expect if the blood is of Jesus, because of the non-father factor. But there is a code in the nucleus, outside the nucleus, mitochondrial DNA, which is potentially capable of being obtained in each of these samples and compared. It hasn't been done in any of them so far, except the Sedarium in Oviedo, the face cloth of Jesus that's kept in Spain. So there's more work to do there yet, but I think that the scientific people have been preoccupied with trying to get a nuclear DNA sample, a result. And I think that what these tests are telling us is that perhaps they won't. And the reason being, if they did, it would be confusing, because the Church believes that Jesus was not born with a paternal intervention.
Hi. I was wondering, when a person becomes a saint, there's a formal ceremony. So is there a formal ceremony when a Eucharistic miracle is declared authentic by the Church?
That's an interesting question. In Poland, they did have a large ceremony in recognition of the miracle. I was present for that and filmed that. It hasn't happened in Argentina, but I suspect it will.
I know, I agree with the lady over there who said that we should just be in awe that this is the living heart of Jesus. And, by and large, the majority of us in here are Catholic, and so that works for us. But in the whole discussion about evolution, atheists, the true Darwinist atheists, the real challenge for them is to first peel them away from a belief in their doctrine of evolution, which is what they hinge on. And so maybe there's a different way for this audience to frame it up as yeah, okay, the Church allows you freedom as long as you acknowledge the Creator and walk in the flesh, but there's a whole boatload of people out there who they won't even acknowledge that supernatural or that author, because they just go right to Darwin. And so that's where I think the real value of what you're doing to challenge their atheistic understanding of how life remains. That's the real value, the real witness in this.
I agree. I mean, it has two great advantages. One is that aspect of taking away the basis for the atheistic view, and secondly, to present in a beautiful form the magnitude of the Eucharist in what Catholics believe. So it does a dual role. It's a tremendous story from that point of view. So it basically can appeal to every category, those who are believers in Jesus and those who don't. But it's not going to be an easy ride for its acceptance, because there's such a vested interest in preventing this being true, I suppose. Yeah.
Why not give the whole sample? Why didn't they take the whole sample? There's so many Christians throughout the world to sit there and say, hey, look, this is something beyond what they've been teaching us. This is the truth of what science is going to tell us. Why not use the whole sample? Just the whole sample, the whole heart, so they can actually...
But the question is, where do you end? All you need for this argument, for this case, is one cell. And we've got stacks of them, we've got tissue. So we don't need more tests to show more of that. The argument's made on the tests that are done. I think the point that you're trying to make is that if more tests were done, more people would be convinced. Is that the point? There's more testing that can be done by the analysis of the cells, which is what we hope to do in the future, so that in the area that we've taken, there's a lot of information still to be gained. And so I think that I'm happy that what has happened is strong enough to carry the day on that argument. But there's more to be done on the DNA side of it, the cell content issue, which is what we hope to do in the next series. Yes, where's Tim? There's a lady here too. Yeah.
Is there any new actual documented scientific evidence, since it supposedly happens over and over and over in the last 200 years? Have we had any new species that just evolved and we could say, hey, they're here?
I know you'll have to ask them that. I don't think so. I think it's a theory that's fraught with problems. What happens if we're evolving? What do we evolve into next, you know, if it's a process that continues?
I'm interested in the very first question she asked about the sample you took from Catalina.
The answer was that it was her blood. So it's obvious that what happens is God's permitting a person to reflect in their own body the passion of Christ. So it's consistent that it would be her blood if it's operating in her body. And that's what we found, it was her blood.
By the way, most of you probably know this who are left here, but the Vatican is very, very skeptical about these things. It's not like they go, oh yeah, and there's over 100 at least documented cases that, I mean, it's not like 1 or 2 or 3. I mean, it's, hopefully you know there's hundreds of cases that have been scientifically validated.
But what's interesting is that you've seen in this case the investigation, and I think that this is probably one of the best examples of a tremendous result where the evidence is available for everyone to see. Yeah.
I want to thank you for your work.
Thank you.
As Catholics, we all believe in the transfiguration. We already believe this. If we read the scriptures, this when Jesus was with us, he was challenged to perform miracles for those who did not know. I'm nervous. It's just testing. As it happened, we all live in a spiritual world. I do. The depth of our prayer will bring how many spiritual miracles we will live in our lives. I think the absence of prayer and what has happened, I absolutely believe that the Lord will be doing the same miracles of the doubting Thomases and those, and will come forward. And I thank you for trying to document. It's like document the fishes or Lazarus or, you know, the wine. It's a daunting task in a world that truly, how many times has Darwin's name been mentioned? And he is a man. He is not divine. He's someone who just observed, you know, in like the Galapagos Islands. And so much has gone because he's a man.
which just says to me as a Catholic how much a need we have for him and his miracles and to see it. And I just want to thank you again for doing it, because we do believe in the Transfiguration. I believe when I receive my Eucharist and the wine that night is truly time and space. I always say to myself, you know, I am there and he is here and it is real and it is now, and I'm not surprised at all at any of this. I think it's happening all the time. Thank you for trying to do the human research.
Thank you for that.
On these teachings.
Thank you.